April 12, 1981. Keddie, California. A tiny cabin tucked in the woods. Inside, blood smeared on walls. A woman tied up. Her face beaten. Her son, stabbed, again and again. 3 children found sleeping, just feet away. 1 is missing. Gone. Without a trace. Earlier that night, it was quiet. Peaceful. A family watching TV. Kids playing cards. Then came the knock. Then came the horror. Who did this? Why leave some alive? And why, did police say almost nothing? This isn't just a story. It's a real crime. One that still haunts a town, and might involve people still walking free. Subscribe now to Unbelievable True Story. This is the Keddie Cabin Murders. Watch to the very end. April 11, 1981. Keddie, California. 6 p.m. The sun was setting behind the Sierra Nevada mountains, painting the pine trees in soft gold. Keddie, a tiny railroad town tucked deep in Plumas County, was nearly silent. Just 66 people lived here, tightly packed in a cluster of old cabins, many of them falling apart. Cabin 28 sat near the edge of the dirt road. It looked like the others, small, wooden, worn. But inside, a family was trying to start over. Sue Sharp, a 36-year-old single mother, had moved to Keddie just months earlier. She brought her 5 children with her: John, 15. Sheila, 14. Tina, 12. Rick, 10, and Greg, 5. They had left Connecticut in a hurry. Sue had escaped an abusive husband. She had no car. No money. Just her kids and a suitcase of hope. Keddie's low rent made it the only place she could afford. That Saturday night, Cabin 28 was full of life. Rick and Greg were watching TV in the bedroom. Their friend Justin Smart, a neighbor boy, was spending the night. Tina was at the Seabolt's cabin, nearby, watching a movie. Sheila, the oldest girl, was planning to sleep over there too. Sue was home with her oldest son, John, and his friend Dana Wingate, 17. They were out that evening, hitchhiking back from Quincy, the nearby town. Locals would later say they saw them walking along the highway. No one could know, it would be the last peaceful evening this family ever had. 8 p.m. The sky darkened. The mountains faded into black. In Cabin 28, the lights flickered. The children brushed their teeth. Sue changed into her robe. John and Dana returned, laughing about something. They had a 6-pack of beer. They were probably planning to hang out, maybe listen to music in the boys' room. Tina returned from the Seabolt's house around 9:30 p.m. She walked the short dirt path in the dark and entered the cabin, where her mom greeted her softly. No loud arguments. No signs of danger. Just a quiet night in the mountains. 2 a.m. April 12th. Something shattered the stillness. A knock on the door. A scream? Or maybe, just silence, thick and suffocating. We don't know exactly what happened. But what came next was pure terror. The killers entered Cabin 28. Whether they were let in or forced their way through, we still don't know. What we do know is that what happened inside that cabin was not quick. It was not clean. And it was not quiet. Whoever it was, came with a knife. And a hammer. And something much darker. 7 a.m. Easter Sunday. 14-year-old Sheila Sharp walked home from her friend's house. The air was cool. Birds were chirping. There was no sign of anything wrong. She walked up to the front door and opened it. And then she froze. There, in the living room, was her mother, Sue Sharp. She was lying on her side. Gagged. tied with electrical tape and wires. Her face was bruised, beaten, beyond recognition. Blood had soaked the floor. A blanket barely covered her. Next to her was John, her brother. His body slumped. Dana Wingate was nearby, sprawled and lifeless. They had been stabbed. Beaten. Tortured. The TV was still glowing. A small knife, bent from force, lay near the wall. Sheila didn't scream. She turned and ran. She bolted back to the Seabolts' house, crying, shaking, her words barely forming. "There's blood," she said. "My mom, my brother." The Seabolts raced to the scene. They saw the same horror and called police. But what no one realized was that inside the small back bedroom, 3 boys were still alive. Rick Sharp, Greg Sharp, and Justin Smart. All under the age of 11. They had slept through it. Or maybe, pretended to. We may never know. They were found untouched. Curled up together in the bottom bunk. The killers had left them. But someone was missing. Tina Sharp. She was nowhere to be found. Her jacket, shoes, and Walkman were gone. The back door was left wide open. She didn't run. She didn't leave a note. She was just gone. Within hours, word spread through Keddie like a firestorm. A mother, her son, and his friend, brutally murdered. A 12-year-old girl, vanished without a trace. And the youngest children, left alive in the middle of it all. This wasn't a robbery. Nothing valuable was taken. This wasn't random. It was rage. But who could do this? To a mother and her children? Why were some killed, and some spared? And why did it seem like no one was rushing to answer those questions? Police arrived. But from the start, the investigation crumbled. They didn't tape off the scene. Neighbors walked in and out. They didn't secure the evidence. Crucial items were touched. Moved. Contaminated. One of the worst decisions. They didn't search the surrounding woods immediately. They didn't put out a missing child alert for Tina until hours later. They called it a domestic issue. But this was not domestic. It was deliberate. It was calculated. And it was evil. As night fell again in Keddie, the lights in every cabin were shut tight. Doors locked. Curtains drawn. Because now, everyone knew. There was a killer in the woods. Maybe more than one. And they weren't done yet. April 12, 1981. Keddie, California. Police cruisers lined the dirt road outside Cabin 28. Uniformed officers walked back and forth, eyes wide, faces pale. Small-town cops, facing something big. Something they had never trained for. A triple homicide. A missing child. And a crime scene soaked in silence. Inside the cabin, it looked like a war zone. Not chaos. Controlled brutality. The bodies of Sue Sharp, John Sharp, and Dana Wingate lay in grim stillness. Sue, 36, was partially covered with a yellow blanket. She had been beaten so badly, her face was barely recognizable. John, 15, her oldest son, was stabbed and bludgeoned. His hands showed signs of a struggle. Dana, 17, John's friend, had been strangled, and possibly beaten with a hammer. They were tied up with medical tape and electrical cords. Their wrists, ankles, and mouths were bound tightly. A steak knife, bent at a 30-degree angle from force, was found near the couch. A second knife was left in Sue's chest. A hammer was nearby, its handle sticky with blood. On the walls, tiny spatter patterns. On the carpet, footprints. Nothing was stolen. No valuables touched. This wasn't about money. It was about rage. Or fear. Or something worse. The most shocking detail wasn't the blood. It was the stillness. 3 boys, Rick, Greg, and Justin, were asleep just down the hall. They hadn't been touched. They claimed they hadn't heard a thing. They were 10, 5, and 12 years old. But could they really have slept through the screams, the pounding, the blood? Or had they stayed silent, out of terror? Police questioned the boys gently. Justin said he had a dream. A dream about men hurting people in the living room. A hammer. Screaming. But, was it a dream? Or was it a memory? As the bodies were documented, an officer called out. "Where's Tina?" No one had seen her. At first, police assumed she'd gone for a walk. Maybe stayed with a friend. But her jacket, her shoes, her cassette player, were gone. And the back door was wide open. That's when fear became panic. A child wasn't just missing. She had been taken. And they had no idea by who. Sheriff Doug Thomas stepped in front of the cameras. His voice was flat. His words simple. "We are working all leads." But behind closed doors, the investigation was already falling apart. No fingerprints were taken from key areas. The cabin wasn't sealed properly. Locals walked through the house, out of curiosity. Critical evidence was moved, or lost. And perhaps the worst failure of all. The cabin wasn't searched thoroughly. In the basement, bloody footprints were later found. Missed. 4 weeks. Was this random? No. Was this personal? Maybe. Sue Sharp had been struggling. She was taking a typing class. Raising 5 kids alone. Rumors swirled in town, about her rejecting local men, about trouble at home. Some said maybe it was a jealous boyfriend. Others whispered darker things, revenge. A cover-up. Something drug-related. But no theory explained why 3 people were killed, while 3 children were left alive. Or why Tina, the quiet, shy middle child, was taken. If it was about Sue, why take the daughter? If it was about John and Dana, why kill Sue? Nothing made sense. Then came the first real break. From next door. Justin Smart's parents, Marilyn and Martin Smart, lived in cabin 26, just feet away. Martin had served in Vietnam. He was short-tempered. Known to carry knives. He once told a neighbor, "I'd kill for less than what she did." Police began digging. Marilyn told investigators something chilling. Martin hated Sue. He said she was trying to break up our marriage. Then they learned about Beau Boubade, a man staying with the Smarts that week. Beau was a convicted felon. A known criminal. With mafia ties. He had just been released from jail. Why was he in Keddie? No one could say. Justin, the 12-year-old boy, was taken to a hypnotherapist. Under hypnosis, he described 2 men. One with long dark hair and glasses. One with short blonde hair and a mustache. Both wearing jackets and boots. They had entered the cabin. One held a hammer. There was screaming. Fighting. Blood. One woman begged them to stop. A child cried out. The police made a sketch. It looked like Martin Smart. And Beau. But then. Silence. Police never arrested them. They questioned Martin and Beau. Martin said he didn't hear anything that night. That he and Beau went to a bar. Came home. Slept. Beau said the same. Neither had an alibi. But still, no charges. No arrests. Instead, the case slowed. Then stalled. Then went cold. And Tina was still missing. Cabin 28 was boarded up. But the bloodstains were still visible through the windows. Sheila Sharp, the girl who found her family, moved in with relatives. Rick and Greg were too young to understand. But they would never forget what they had seen. Or heard. Or smelled. And in the woods outside Keddie. Parents kept their children close. Because whoever did this, was still out there. Maybe in town. Maybe watching. Keddie, California. Spring 1981. Weeks had passed since the murders. The town still felt broken. Kids stayed inside. Doors stayed locked. And everywhere you looked, there were whispers. The sheriff said, "We're doing all we can." But the Sharp family knew the truth. They weren't. A crime scene fumbled. From the very start, the investigation was a mess. No photos were taken immediately after discovery. No proper forensic team handled the scene. Locals had walked in and out of cabin 28 freely before police arrived. Worse still, critical evidence vanished. And no one could explain why. A bloody fingerprint on a handrail? Uncollected. Tape and cord bindings? Discarded. Even the knives used in the killings, handled with bare hands. Some called it negligence. Others whispered cover-up. The case file shrinks. Days turned to weeks. Witnesses came forward. But their statements went missing. A neighbor who claimed she saw headlights near the cabin late that night? No follow-up. A report of two men burning clothing near the river? Ignored. A tip that Bo Bubaid had ties to organized crime in Chicago? Unfounded, the sheriff wrote. Bit by bit, the case file shrank. And so did the town's faith in justice. Let's go back. Martin Smart, a short-fused ex-military cook. Divorced. Erratic. Known to carry a hammer. Bo Bubaid, a former Chicago enforcer with criminal records and aliases. No clear reason to be in Keddie. Why were these two men together? Why were they staying next door? And why were both suddenly gone, just days after the murders? Martin claimed he moved to Reno to clear his head. Bo disappeared entirely. The case file said, no further action needed. Then came something strange. Marilyn Smart, Martin's ex-wife, found a letter. It was from Martin. And it was chilling. I've paid the price for your love. I've done everything you asked. I killed them. She turned it over to police. But again, no arrest. No charges. When pressed, investigators said. The letter was taken out of context. But what context makes that sentence okay? What context justifies those words, after a triple homicide? Remember Justin? 12 years old. Slept in the same house as the victims. He was hypnotized by a trained specialist weeks after the murders. He said he saw two men. One had a mustache. One had long hair and glasses. They used a hammer. One attacked Sue. Another tied up John and Dana. He said Tina was awake, confused, scared. Then one man said, "We're taking the little girl." And they left. Police drew sketches. The faces looked exactly like Martin and Bo. Still, no arrest. April turned into May. Then June. Then summer. Still no trace of Tina Sharp. Posters went up. Flyers were mailed. She's 4 feet 10 inches, 90 pounds, with dark hair and shy eyes. The community held vigils. But the trail was cold. No scent for dogs to follow. No sign she ever left the cabin by foot. Many feared the worst. Others clung to hope. She's out there somewhere, Sue's sister told reporters. We just want her home. But not everyone wanted her found. Because Tina knew things. Maybe, too much. By fall of 1981, Sheriff Doug Thomas resigned. Some said it was pressure. Others said he had connections to one of the suspects. He denied it. But the damage was done. A new sheriff stepped in. But momentum was lost. The Sharp family begged for outside help. They wrote to the governor. The FBI. Even 60 Minutes. No one responded. The Sharp children were split up. Sheila, the girl who found the bodies, went into therapy. She suffered from nightmares, flashbacks, and guilt. Rick and Greg, the youngest boys, became quiet. Withdrawn. Afraid of the dark. Sue's surviving relatives moved out of Keddie. They couldn't bear to stay. Cabin 28 was left abandoned. People said it was haunted. But the truth was worse. It was a graveyard. And no one had been held responsible. In town, whispers became roars. I saw Bo with blood on his boots. I heard Martin burned something in a fire pit. I think the sheriff knew and did nothing. But these were just rumors. With no justice, people turned on each other. Friendships collapsed. Neighbors stopped talking. And Keddie, once a place of summer joy, became a town of fear and silence. Let's go back again. What was really found in the cabin? 1. A hammer. 2. 2 knives. 3. Electrical tape. 4. Shoe prints, not matching any victim. 5. A bloody handprint on the doorframe. Why weren't these tested properly? Decades later, a retired detective would say. The evidence was all there. We just didn't look hard enough. The cabin wasn't secured for 24 hours. The entire town could have walked through it. Evidence was collected without gloves. The suspects were allowed to leave town. Even today, criminal experts say. This case should have been solved in 1981. But it wasn't. Because the right people didn't want it to be. Let's explore the theories. 1. Jealousy. Martin Smart was angry Sue was advising Marilyn to leave him. He had a violent past. Was this his twisted revenge? 2. Silencing a witness. Did Tina see something? Was she awake during the crime? Did someone come back to make sure she never told? 3. Criminal cover-up. Bo Bubaid had ties to organized crime. Was Sue trying to expose something? Was this a message? All are possible. None are confirmed. And no one has paid. By 1984, the story was cold. By 1990, it was forgotten. Tina was still missing. No suspects were ever charged. And Cabin 28, once a happy getaway, stood in silence. Windows broken. Door locked. Bloodstains faded, but not forgotten. Then one day, a bottle collector walked through the woods near Feather Falls. He bent down to check inside an old trash pile. And what he found, stopped time. He thought it was an animal at first. But then he saw the teeth. Human. Small. Fragile. He called the police. Within hours, crime scene tape stretched across the forest floor. Investigators unearthed a child's skull, partially buried. A jawbone with a few teeth still attached. Bits of clothing, rotted and torn. A small blanket, moldy and frayed. And beside them, something stranger. A blue nylon jacket and a pair of child-sized bones. They called in dental records. And the match came back. Tina Sharp had been found. 3 years gone. She was just 12 when she vanished. Now she was, bones in the dirt. But this discovery only raised more questions. Who brought her 50 miles away into the woods? Was she killed the night of the murders? Or was she kept alive? And why, had her body been hidden for so long? As news broke, reporters swarmed the Sharp family. Sheila was now a teenager. And just when she thought the nightmare was over, another twist. A tape surfaced. It was a 911 call, made months before the skull was discovered. An anonymous voice said, "You might want to look in the woods by Feather Falls. There's a body there. It's a little girl." He never gave his name. He hung up before police could trace the line. But the voice? Some swore it sounded like Bo Bubaid. Shockingly, police didn't investigate the call when it was first made. It sat on a shelf. Unlabeled. Unlogged. Forgotten. Until Tina's skull was discovered in the exact place the caller described. By then, it was too late to trace the number. Too late to question anyone. Too late, again. By 1985, Sheila had had enough. She went public, on camera. Her voice cracked as she said, "I know who did this. I've known for years. And they got away with it." Reporters asked, "Who?" She didn't answer. But in later interviews, she pointed fingers at Martin Smart and Bo Bubaid. She said Martin had threatened her mother. Bo was always lurking. Watching. And one night, she heard the two men talking, about how they'd handled it. You'd think that kind of testimony would reopen the case. But no. The sheriff's office said there wasn't enough evidence. No confession. No murder weapon. No witnesses who saw Tina's body being moved. So the case remained unsolved. And once again, Keddie went quiet. In 2004, more than 20 years after the murders, Cabin 28 was demolished. No warning. No ceremony. Locals say it was to erase the memory. But the Sharp family didn't agree. To them, it was like tearing down a headstone. They wanted answers, not bulldozers. But the town wanted to forget. Everything changed in 2013. A new sheriff, Greg Hagwood, took office. He'd grown up in the area. And he remembered the fear. He reopened the file. Something was wrong with this case. From the beginning. He brought in retired Detective Mike Gamberg. Within months, they found something chilling. Near a dried-up pond not far from Cabin 28. They found a hammer. It had been buried deep in mud. It matched the exact description Martin Smart gave, years earlier, of the hammer he'd lost. It had traces of blood. It had blunt force damage. And yet, no one had searched this area until 2016. The hammer had been sitting there, for 35 years. Then came another shock. A sealed envelope was discovered in an old evidence locker. Inside? A copy of the 911 call. The lost hammer. All part of the Keddie Cabin Murders. Before her remains were scattered in the woods. One rumor never went away. That someone, maybe the killers, filmed what happened in Cabin 28. A local teen once claimed he saw a tape at a party in the late 80s. He described Sue tied up. A man with a hammer. Screaming. But when police followed up, the boy was gone. Moved away. Later found dead in another state. Overdose. Case closed. But the story stuck. Because too many things in Keddie have gone missing. Tina. The hammer. The truth. This is a real story. Every scene. Every name. Every horror. It's not a movie. It's not a legend. It's something that really happened, to real people, in real pain. If stories like this move you, haunt you, subscribe now to Unbelievable True Story. Because what we uncover next may hit even closer to home.